Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Kirsten Webb, and I am here with my dear friend Ben Murphy. And we are the facilitators of the Storyweavers study group and calls. And we just wanted to share with you a little bit today about what that's all about and what we're all about, and a bit of our backgrounds and what you can expect from our Storyweaver sessions together. So, first, I'm going to introduce Ben. Ben is a dear, dear friend of mine that I've known for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. But we really started becoming pretty close over the past few years through a project that Ben invited me into that continues to weave storytelling, mythology, music, ritual, performance. And so over the course of a couple of years, we just started going really, really deep together into those worlds. And I've been so grateful for the time that we have spent doing that and the time we've spent just deepening our friendship together. And something that I just really admire about Ben is his deep devotion, not only to the myths and the stories, but to the enactment, to the practice, to the living of their wisdom in his life, and devotion to the other world, devotion to ritual. For someone like me who can be very Gemini, very scattered and interested in so many different things, Ben has just been such a deep anchoring presence for me to really come into a deeper relationship with these worlds and these ways that I've been, part of my whole life. But I've really found that through my friendship and work with Ben so far that he has really, helped me to find my own sense of deep devotion. And he shows what that looks like, and he really walks the talk, as they say, when it comes to taking the wisdom that comes from these myths and stories and really, embodying it in life and sharing it, and diving deep in his own way through his own writing practices and rewriting so many of these myths in these brilliant creative ways. And so I'll turn it over to Ben, and he can share a little bit about himself with you.
Hmm. Wow. Thanks for that, Kirsten. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to share a little bit about kind of what I'm coming to the table with, bringing to this endeavor, this inquiry, ongoing inquiry and study in the Storyweavers group. Um, I think that the most, relevant place for me to start is, pretty early on, and just having been raised in this very like Christian context, come to appreciate actually the extremity of that experience for me. Uh, Basically, I didn't know anybody that wasn't Christian until about 10th grade or so, when I went full on into a public high school. And in retrospect, Kirsten was sort of mentioning this, like walking this talk, or like embodying and bringing an intention of devotion to these things. And as I look back on that experience of being raised in the Christian context, it just strikes me like how devoid of embodiment of the very rich story reservoir that there is in the Christian tradition, and how shallowly those stories are engaged. And it was through a several years ago, a series of lectures that started to like explore biblical stories from a different perspective, that right along I mean, right on the tail of that exploration of story is where I discovered Iron John. Sort of cliche to say at this point, that's part of what brings me into this inquiry as a man, and having stepped into men's groups, doing that. The men's group that I was a part of, I found myself consistently wanting to like just turn towards mythology, turn towards, these things, and sort of like reenact some of what the mythopoetic men's movement was doing. And my men's group wasn't that of that thought process, and for many different reasons that group ended. Um, but I kind of carried that on, that inquiry, that diving into that hunger for more, for a deepening in awareness around what stories have to offer. Um, at that time, as Kirsten mentioned, our project that we started together was this multi-medium exploration of myth, of story, writing, music, performance, ritual. Um, and at the time I was in this men's group and working with Iron John, I was also studying in music school and really kind of getting a sense, doing a composition degree, of what it feels like to have a ritual space dedicated to, in that context, it was music, but to a sort of an unfolding. It felt ritualistic to me to have this these musicians and performers kind of come together after weeks of preparation to unfold this thing that I had created and imagined. Um, and along with that, as Kirsten and my project got rolling, we really worked with creating ritual spaces quite a bit and invoking and feeling the presence of mythic forces that for me at the time, up to that point, I had never had that kind of an experience of that, and I can credit, my collaboration with Kirsten to this sort of initiation and into an embodiment of what these stories are capable of bringing to a life. It's not stopped since then. Yeah, and then has become more intentional as I've learned more about creating ritual and about a term that's pretty new for me, which is mythosomatics. This relationship between myth and story, and how we bring that into the body and how we bring that back to the earth. That's to me a you know more often than not where the stories lead is back to the earth. Um, let me see, where am I going from there is the question. The the things that I'm most excited to bring to this endeavor, this inquiry of Storyweavers, along with the pretty constant like stream of reading I'm doing, and the reaching for more more stories, more depth in what those stories are about, more context for where they came from, and a better perspective on how to apply them to what's relevant to us right now is this practice of embodiment. And I'm one major thing that came off the tail of my Christian upbringing was becoming a body worker, and sort of realizing in retrospect that these sessions that I was giving people were mini rituals and opportunities to bring people into the body. So um, one thing you can expect, or part of what you can expect coming to these calls, is sort of a ritual context, an opportunity to come into a resonance together, even though we may physically be separate. Um, Sort of like bleeding into our next topic that we're gonna talk about. So I'm gonna stop there. Um, but yeah, I am happy to get to introduce you to this human that I'm here with. Um, it's so funny to think about our relationship because there was this place that we intersected at this mindful social mindfulness practice called Solsara. Maybe some of you have heard of it years and years ago, and didn't it's like nothing really like happened in terms of like a friendship then. And then it was after my graduation from music school that I reached out to her, like after seeing like these like provocative performance art photos that she had on Instagram, that I was like, you want to do some music? This seems like it could be an interesting thing. And we got together and I told her this stuff that I was working on, and she was super down. It was just such a like a wow, somebody wants to like play with me. Yay. um and since then, it's like I said, like I feel this like deep gratitude for Kirsten's presence in my life in this way that uh you know, a relationship to life on a mythic level came alive for me in a way that I hadn't experienced before that. And it's not as if like Kirsten initiated me into something, but she was integral in that process for me. And there was things that she was bringing to the table that I had no, concept of prior to her presence in my life. And I'm constantly in admiration of just the so many different things, but I'll share a little bit just about the fact that Kirsten has been living a largely nomadic life for quite a while, and just journeying, being present for part of that journey. As a friend, I've been grounded in Portland, Oregon, where we met, but seeing her journey across the Pacific Northwest, and now having, when at the time of this recording, living in Hawaii, just appreciating the adaptability, the flexibility, the willingness to step into a flow and a faith that there is a ground to land on, and that it's hard to convey exactly the the power of that kind of living of life of a life of faith. There's something to me of the mythic, that really uh, is embodied there and is lived in a way that in certain ways I'm like, wow, I couldn't do that. It's such an inspiration to me to be stepping forward into the devotion to life on that level, and being in connection to land on that level. So deep gratitude to get to introduce to you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Ben. So beautiful to hear all that. Um, yeah, so I guess I'll just sort of tell a little bit about my own background and kind of what brings me to Storyweavers. So my whole life I have been, since I was like 3 years old, I guess, a performer, writer, storyteller of various ways, just theater artist. And yeah, kind of, kept pursuing that throughout my childhood, middle school, high school years, and at the same time was being kind of called into the other world. I remember like sitting in the field of Scotch broom next to my family's house when we moved back to the Oregon coast when I was 11, and just felt drawn to go out there and pick up these sticks and just start carving runes on the sticks. I had like just learned about runes, and was talking to the spiders and just talking to the trees and the land, and like this was this whole new world that was opening up to me. So exploring that, doing the theater and the writing thing. And then in college, I was fortunate enough to study myth and ritual with David Graeber at Yale. And from there, dove even deeper into world mythologies, and especially focused on feminist kind of retellings of mythology. Wrote my senior essay on Angela Carter, if you're familiar with her, and her just ways of troubling and queering mythology and storytelling in general. And also got really deep into experimental theater at that time, and ritual practice. So these ways of telling stories, that it's like telling a story with the body, telling stories in ways that aren't just words. Yeah, and then post-college, I thought I was going to have this kind of, I don't know what I thought my life was going to be, but didn't turn out, as I'm sure for many of you listening, it hasn't either, the way I thought. And I was kind of launched by many different forces into this ongoing initiatory journey, that just led me into all these experiences and places that I never would have imagined otherwise, and lots of living on the road and moving around a lot and just following intuition, and really had no roadmap for it. So was very, blessed to come across a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves about 13 years ago, and started to kind of really finally find a roadmap for myself, which I hadn't. I'd been obsessed with mythology in high school when I first discovered Joseph Campbell and the power of myth, but and something about it was just so resonant to me. But then once I myself was out in the world living into the mystery, it's like that the hero's journey and these stories like weren't cutting it as far as like how to navigate. And so finding these other stories that were, specifically in this case passed down by women and transmitted by women, really helped me orient. And so that still to this day is one of my like core books that continues to help me. So throughout those wandering years, those initiatory years, also the archetype of, I don't know if it's an archetype, but I'm going to say it is now, of chronic illness kind of came into my life and took me into various underworld experiences. And so I feel like now I'm coming to my work with the school and with Storyweavers with a lot of life experience to share, of like, here's these arcs of these journeys, here are the kind of patterns I was living out, and here's how these stories actually helped me in my life. So I'm grateful for them now, because all through those experiences, I was praying all the time, like, please help me make this into medicine one day. If I live to tell the tale, please help me tell the tale in a way that can be good for others, for my communities. Um, yeah, continued over the past several years with theater, ritual performance, devising my own solo ritual performances. A lot of that was my own methods of doing ancestral healing and personal trauma healing through ritual and these versions of storytelling. And then in the past few years, I've been really lucky to live in a place, before I moved here to Hawaii, where there was a pretty strong like elders holding the storytelling role. So being able to sit with elders in storytelling spaces and just being really reminded, like, oh, right, it's not just words on a page, and it's not just something that I'm like experiencing on my own in this kind of like cultural vacuum, right? Because these journeys just felt so solitary. But then to be in this shared space with this, like, these incredible elders, or whoever, people of all ages sharing a story, it's like, this is what we need. This is this ancient technology, and it's so simple. But to be in that shared space of entrainment and resonance, where we can go into kind of this trance together. And I don't want to get ahead of myself with what we're going to be talking about, but it kind of helped me, that and my work with Ben on this project, simultaneously really kind of anchored in me, and awoke at the same time this desire and this necessity to, like, okay, this is part of my life's work. This is something that I want to be honing and cultivating and sharing and helping others develop. Because it's such an easy thing. We don't need anything to tell a story, right? We just need ourselves, our memory, our voice, or whatever method we want to use to tell it. And it's just so huge and such medicine. So yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing all those pieces to this work here, and so grateful to be working with Ben on that. Yeah, so I'll pass it back over to Ben with a question of just, what is Storyweavers to you? What does it mean to you? Why does it feel important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I'll share the part of the way I've come to intersect as a collaborator in the School of Mythopoetics, was last year. Interestingly, I was on a ritual journey down south, and Ian messaged me about wanting to do if to see if I wanted to facilitate or attend the men's space, which was being reformatted to center story. So it wouldn't be so much of a men's work kind of space, but it'd be a story space that happened to be occupied by men. And at the time, the women's circle was just not up and running at that point. Um, and so stepping in, I mean, it was immediate. Yes, I wanted to do that, and over those months, and this is sort of to start to move towards that question that you just asked me, Kirsten. Um, what is Storyweavers to me? Um, Over those months, having starting to dive into first the story of Parsifal, and then we watched the story or the movie The Green Knight, which is about Sir Gawain, and it's another Arthurian legend that's connected to the Parsifal story. And then we studied Beowulf in January and followed that up with Prometheus. And as these stories started to kind of like roll and sort of snowball in my system, to weave, if you will, um, I just began to really like get a sense of this landscape. Um, and it's hard to put into words, but like the sense that with each successive story there was a thing connecting to the previous one. In from stories that were completely disparate cultures. Like we went from Beowulf to Prometheus, like Anglo-Saxon, kind of like from as Stephen Jenkinson says, our mother book, the first Old English document that we have, to this like ancient story from the Greek tradition. Um, so story weavers to me, if anything, is an opportunity to just like step in to this mythic language that it's not as if, you know, these traditions are all one tradition or something like that. They all have their idiosyncrasies and they're all facets of something, let's say, of something human, maybe we could say. Um, and to like be to be stepping towards this tradition of storytelling, of oral storytelling, um, is to be stepping into relationship with ancestry, is to be stepping into relationship with, you know, our deep roots as humans. Um, yeah, that's kind of what I've got on that question right now. Kirsten, what is Storyweavers to you?
Mm, glad you asked. Let's see. Well, I feel like I already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I dive in a little further. Yeah, well, I love everything that you said. Um, what more can I add to that? Yeah, again, it's just it's a way, it's a place, right? It's a container for us, whoever's participating, to come together and to experience that ancient technology together. I mean, we will be virtual, and you know, it's incredible that we have this technology that we can use to come together from all over the world and sit and hear a story. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like it's a place for us to come together and hear a story, and then to not analyze. I mean, the focus isn't about like analyzing like we would in a college class or something. It's about like feeling it. It's about noticing in this like deeper awareness of where the stories catch us, where we find ourselves in the stories, where we find others, and to kind of start to find these threads of like how we can apply the stories to our lives, but also like let them illuminate our lives, and almost like through this kind of dream logic, help us come to better clarity about issues in our lives that we're dealing with, issues in our communities, issues in our world, and also to, you know, to be just medicine, to be food and medicine, and once in a while maybe even to just be a little bit entertained. Like there's nothing wrong with that either, but and we need it. We as humans really, we need it. We need to sit around the fire before bed and just kind of let our troubles go and hear a story. But also in Storyweavers, we do have this intention to kind of dive deep into the material together and to see what it evokes in us. What does it bring out, and how does it help us navigate our lives? We're walking into the unknown all the time, and we do have these maps that can help us find our way, because human experience hasn't changed that much in the past several thousand years. Like what it looks like may be different, but the root of it, the heart of it, the essence of our experience hasn't changed. And I also see it as a place where we can start to kind of create our own stories too, you know, and find our own new versions of these myths and start to learn how to tell them, you know, ourselves, and to, for everyone, you know, joining us to like be able to bring stories to your communities and to your families and to your lives.
I mean, one thing that I'm you know, hearing and I want to name in how we're talking about this is, you know, like we're coming with like kind of like a structure that we're, you know, kind of like set, you know, this is what we're gonna do, but like there there is going to be an intentional like emergent process to how this unfolds and what it becomes. Um, you know, just from having done this for several months, just the opportunities to, you know, bring something that's going to keep things fresh, that's going to like enliven the space is like a major piece of, I think, what we want. We want this to be an alive space. It's not about, you know, here, come tell this story that is this rote thing. It's about, you know, come be a participant in this big story that we're all a part of, that, you know, our ancient ancestors have been telling us about for, you know, however long, and now we get to kind of like learn about that big story a little bit further. um and for me, like another, you know, just thing I want to name is just the idea of like sacred space set aside, where we're not dealing with our phones, you know, ideally. We're just letting ourselves kind of step into a dream and see what, you know, comes alive in us having done that.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. Thanks for naming that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I really see this also as a way of like, part of our deeper intention with the school itself is this revillaging work that so many of us are involved in so many different ways. And for Storyweavers itself to become a feeling of village, a feeling where we can come back to and return and be seen and go deeper and deeper together. The more that we become comfortable with each other and comfortable with the structure and everything, that we can keep opening into these deeper layers that the story offers us and that we bring, and just see where that takes us. So I'm really looking forward to that emergence in particular. Mhm.
Touch on just the structure of what, kind of we're bringing to the table in just a couple minutes. I mean, one thing to name is that we are oriented in a slightly sideways way, where we're not using the calendrical month to dictate our thematics. We're working with the zodiacal signs, which are kind of like sort of like in the tail end of a month, the sign switches. So for instance, at the time of this recording, we've just passed into the sign of Gemini. So having just passed into the sign of Gemini, say like next year, the first Tuesday of that sign will be our first Storyweavers call, and then the fourth or third Tuesday following, so 2 weeks later, will be the next Storyweavers call, and those two calls within that sign will be themed on the archetype that is associated through the astromythical map developed by our friends at the School of Mythopoetics, drawn from various world traditions. That will be what's organizing the stories that we're bringing to the table.
We've chosen to do 2 sessions a month because we are really interested in the idea of having two contrasting stories
Mm-hmm.
a month, because so much of the myths and stories that have been passed down to us tend to be kind of masculine oriented from this sort of more masculine point of view. And so can we find stories that are on the zodiacal theme each month that offer different perspectives, and so bringing more feminine or queer perspective, or even, it doesn't even have to be masculine and feminine contrast, but just contrasting stories to see how that will enrich and deepen the medicine. So that's just a piece to name. Yeah.
Indeed. And then, the basic structure of the calls themselves, we're basically starting with just everybody entering, going around the circle, introducing ourselves in some, succinct way, but just something so that we can all presence ourselves. Then once we've gotten comfortable with each other, we'll do something to invoke the story. Could be an embodiment practice or somatic practice or visualization. And part of the intention here is that we're acknowledging that we are on a virtual format, and we want to engage the body as much as we can. We want to bring awareness into the body. We want to, not that stories need anything more, but given just all the distractions that are possible in life, just something to help us kind of sink into the space even deeper, so that we're kind of preparing our vessel to receive this story that's coming our way. So after that, we'll dive into the story, and then we'll spend the rest of the time, probably after like a little break, um, having a discussion, and that could look different ways. Yeah, could be at times it could be breakout rooms where we're having smaller groups discuss. If it's a smaller group, we might have a broader discussion. If it's a smaller group overall, we might have a broader discussion. And then sometimes we might even get a little analytical or get a little academic and like bring something to the table that's like just another heft of something to like stir conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the basic gist of it. And we look so forward to joining with you all and diving deep into these worlds of story and myth and togetherness. So thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, Ben, any closing words?
I don't think that I have any other closing words. I think, and I hope we said it all.
Thank you all. And see you in Storyweavers.
Yeah, looking forward to being together on this format. Yeah. All right. Until then.